I'm going to be catching up on a few horror movies that I missed out during the month of October because of my Best of the Best horror countdown, starting with a recent release from Shudder, which is an anthology made by Black creators focusing on Black experiences. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Horror Noire is new, streaming on Shudder. It's an anthology directed by Joe West, Julien Christian Lutz, Zandashe Brown, Rob Greenlea, Robin Givens, and Al Leston. It's written by Tananarive, Stephen Barnes, Ezra Clayton Daniels, Shernold Edwards, Stephanie Malia Morris, Victor LaValle, and Kimani Ray Smith. Inspired by last year's documentary, Horror Noir, this anthology features new horror stories from new Black voices in front of and behind the camera. There's not much connective tissue to this anthology, no African-American crypt keeper or anything like that, just cards letting the viewer know when the story is over and when the next one begins. Let's delve into each short film. The Lake was written by Tananarive and Stephen Barnes. It's a twisted little tale about curses and warnings as a woman, played by Leslie Ann Brandt, moves to a new town to start a new life. She has a new job in a school and a new house by the lake, but everyone in town keeps warning the teacher to stay away from the lake and for God's sake don't swim in it. This wouldn't be a horror story if she listened to it, and she quickly breaks the rules. The teacher unleashes something monstrous inside of her. This is a story that isn't afraid to play with taboo subject matter as it focuses on a deeply flawed protagonist in Brandt. While it ends a bit too suddenly for my tastes, The Lake is well acted and suspensefully paced. It turns out to be a strong lead-off for the anthology. There are some limited effects, but this one is horrific because of the twisted subject matter and psychologically horrifying themes. This is well done. Brand of Evil is more of a short with a message. It's about an artist, played by Brandon Mickle Smith, who is attempting to finish a mural for a community center for his neighborhood, but he keeps getting calls from an anonymous man interested in hiring him to design symbols for a high fee. This one focuses on the never-ending battle between right and wrong and profit versus the greater good. While the artist wants to finish his mural, he can't say no to the money. Yes, it all goes horribly wrong. It's a horror story. While I feel the moralistic message is a bit heavy-handed, it still manages to deliver some pretty gnarly kills and some great practical effects work in the end. While the CG is rough, the acting is natural and makes you feel for the entire cast. Brandon Mickle Smith specifically does a nuanced job of fleshing out this conflicted artist. This is your classic selling your soul story that lands a bit too on the nose, categorizing white culture with profit and gentrification and black culture with virtuous community. But it still manages to be shocking at times and hits all the right emotional notes. Bride Before You is a period piece from Shernold Edwards. It's set during the turn of the century and follows a well-to-do black businessman and his bride-to-be. When they're unable to conceive a baby, the man begins philandering around, and the bride goes to search for a witch doctor to ask for help. While asking, she wishes for a boy and that the child be light-skinned. The spell works, but it also unleashes a monstrous force upon the old house they live in. This curse follows the bride through her life and proves to be deadly. This story both manages to cover an expansive story through the years and delve into a topic that isn't as prevalent as it should. I've witnessed the ugly racism between dark-skinned black people and light-skinned black people firsthand. This resentment, which leads back to the era when some slaves worked in the fields and the lighter-skinned ones were deemed more suitable for working in the homes, is still quite prevalent today. Not only is this issue addressed well, but it uses the horror genre as a metaphor for this specific type of racism in a smart and creative way. While I feel the story ends abruptly, it's one of the more potent ones of this anthology. Fugue State is a quick one compared to the others. It stars the Crafts' Rachel True and Dear White People's Malcolm Barrett as married scholars very much in love with one another. Barrett heads off to investigate a person he thinks is a cult leader. He relates cults to religions a little too closely for his wife's tastes. When he returns home, he's a changed man, and True begins investigating on her own to find out just what happened to him. Meanwhile, people with red paint on their faces are attacking non-believers all over the town. Could the matters be linked? Of course they are. While the performances by Barrett and True are really good, this one is predictable from the beginning. There is a good gory scene, but for the most part, the dominoes fall predictably right up to the admittedly well-shot ending. I appreciate this one for being more of just a horror story starring black people than a horror story dealing with themes of being black, but this is one of the lesser entries in the movie. Daddy is as subtle as can be, and reminds me of Villeneuve's Enemy in a lot of ways. I had to watch it twice to really get what's going on. It's about the relationship between a father, played by Luke James, and his autistic son. When the old man next door begins talking about foreboding dangers, the father becomes overly protective and darker. The twist of this one sort of comes out of nowhere. It takes a turn at the end that requires you to know about a specific type of monster. Daddy is suspenseful, but almost too subtle as to the dangers that are going on. It works upon rewatching, but I feel it might have worked better had key components been revealed sooner rather than later in the final seconds. Finally, there's Sundown. Unfortunately, while this one has some very memorable lines, there isn't really a lot of meat to the bones of this short. A pair of married canvassers, Erica Ashe and Tone Bell, go from home to home in a West Virginia town for a black candidate. Unbeknownst to them, the town is not only racist, but also vampires. Unlike the rest of this anthology, Sundown leans into broad stereotypes and even broader humor. It's probably the most Hollywood of the bunch, as everyone is quippy in the face of danger. The laughs, besides the one about the fiddle, land sloppily, and even that joke gets repeated 3 times. The action isn't very convincing, as Erica Ashe is supposed to be some kind of badass able to take down a town full of vampires, but weighs maybe 100 pounds. They also don't kill the vamps right. You're supposed to leave the stake in the vamps' hearts, not just stab them and reuse those things. Also, how come no one gets splinters from doing that? And why is the vampire breastbone so soft to allow a wooden stake driven by a human hand to penetrate it? All fodder for jokes, but never touched upon. Peter Stormare adds to the broad humor, but this one didn't work at all for me. So that's the whole film. The best of the bunch offered sophisticated and interesting questions about horror and the black experience. The worst leaned way too much into lazy humor and broad stereotypes. Most of the stories, though, would fit right into Shudder's other horror series, Creepshow. This is an impressive collection of works, though. It'd be great to see Shudder roll out this as a series during Black History Month instead of throwing them all into one film that might be overlooked during the horror-crowded month of October. I'd be up to watch another one, and Horror Noir introduced me to some new names worth investing in for future outings. That'll be it for today. Please chime in down below in the comments and let me know how on the nose or mind-numbingly wrong I am, or you can counter with your own review. So guys, you know how YouTube works. I'd love to be able to dedicate more time to this channel. I'm not monetized yet, so if you want to help me out, remember to hit all the pertinent bells and whistles down below. Want some spooky comics to read? I have 2 new horror comic book trade paperbacks you should look out for. Both Gravetrancers and Pirouette, collecting never-before-published issues, can be found in only the finest of comic book shops. If you're looking for written reviews, you can find them on my website, mlmillerwrites.com. If you really want to show your support, I also have a Patreon page at mlmiller. Look for the link to my Patreon page down below. Thank you so much for your time, and take care.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're doomed. You're doomed. inside.